with me today who is an amazing person at helping you hire your team members without having headaches. Now, if any of you are here, pop it in the chat for us so that we're here. Let us know where you're coming in from and what it is you do. And while you're at it, tell us, are you thinking about hiring your first or your next team member and you're wanting to make that life easier? Let me double check. All right, got the comments up so I can see them. We must have those, right? So I invited Carolyn here because she has well over 20 years in the hiring area, and she's developed a really cool. She was talking to me one day, and I guess this is been about 2 or 3 months ago. We were on a call, and she just was telling me all this fascinating stuff of how she has a strategy for hiring that works so well. And I was like, you must come on my show. You must. And so she's here with us today. So let me see what she's got over here. She has done senior talent acquisition, and that's what's helped her develop her training programs and her strategies for interviewing so that you get the right fit and your people are in the right place as well. It's not just about you, it's about them too. And she really is expanding now into helping small to mid-sized businesses and to find their own teams. So that's a lot of you guys. Carolyn, say hi, introduce yourself. I know you just got done with Camino Santiago a couple of months ago too.
I did that. Yes, I did that last October, and that was really a life transformative experience for sure. And I considered it my capstone as I worked my way through The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. So anybody that will listen, I will tell them about The Artist's Way and about doing the Camino de Santiago.
I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, 22 years ago, I was hired as a contractor to do recruiting and had really no idea where to start. There wasn't a lot of systems in place at the place where I was hired as a contractor. I asked the person I was hired to assist, and she didn't have a lot of guidance. But thankfully, the company got smart and, trained us on behavioral interviewing techniques. And ultimately I got trained and certified to not only teach behavioral interviewing, but to coach those who are doing the interviews in the proper interview technique. But it was a really learning journey for me, because when I started out, I just kind of muddled through. And I think a lot of small business owners, that's where they start too. But thankfully I had the benefit of some formalized training and certification in the process, and spent 20 odd years doing that.
I admit, my first hire, and I got lucky. I mean, I muddled through it with the help of the employer I had at the time, and that's where I learned it. But I did not learn, the minute you said behavioral interview, and I immediately started thinking like FBI or something, that just popped into my head, so official,
Yeah.
It's like, ooh, forensics.
And it's really very simple. It's the idea that past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. So when you interview candidates, you really want to ask them to give you specific examples of things that they had actually done. Not theory, not what would you do in a hypothetical situation, but what have you actually done? And so you can craft questions around the competencies that are important for the role to get at that information and to get examples of that. And it's just a conversation, really. Telling stories, true stories, not made-up stories.
I'm all about the conversation. And that was actually the big thing. When the minute you said that you were actually asking people in an interview to share their actual experience, the actual stories of how they handled things like that. That was what fascinated me so much with this, because we've all done job interviews and the questions made absolutely no sense whatsoever. And for me, This is going to go back. This is a funny story that it just popped in my head the other day for some reason. In my landscape company one day, we had a guy, and this is where it goes to that thing, where you say when you assume something, you make an ass out of you and me if you don't ask more questions.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had hired this
Yeah.
new guy, and it was to plant plants, spring planting. We were a full blown everything, and I just assumed everybody knew to take the pot off before you put the plant in the ground. I mean, kind of one of those kind of you think common sense things. Well, I left him alone. I laid him out, just told him where to plant everything. Came back 2 hours later. He had everything planted beautifully. I mean, he did a really good job. It looked great. And then I'm like, okay, let's clean up. Where's all the pots? He goes, what do you mean, where's the pots? He had put them in the ground with the pots on. So we had to dig everything back up and start over. I didn't ask the question, though. That was on me.
Well, yeah. And, asking basic technical questions, about whatever field, is important. But also you want to get at their soft skills. How do they work in a team environment? What things have they done in a leadership? But some basic questions about the nuts and bolts of the job are definitely important.
Don't assume, people. Don't assume anything.
Yeah. And hopefully gone are the days where you're going to get interview questions like, if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be? Or if you were an animal. And we had to work with some of our hiring managers because, they had some pet questions that they like to ask. And it was like, no. No, that's not really going to give you useful information.
Let me ask you how you feel about this, because the last 2 corporate management jobs I took, and this has been 2008 was the last one. I had to do a psychological, or not a psychological exam. I had to do one of them I had to do a psychological exam as well. But I had to do the personality test. How do you feel about a personality test as a determinant for hiring someone?
Yeah, that can get a little dicey. And I think, as an employer, you'd want to really work with legal counsel, to try to make sure that what you're testing for is really relevant to the specific job. And we did do some, experimenting with some pre-employment testing, and we did work with a company who specialized in that kind of thing. But you definitely have to be careful about that. And you have to make sure that what you're asking is really something that's relevant and necessary to the specific job.
Yeah, and I mean, I could see somewhere like maybe you are working, since we already mentioned the FBI, maybe you are working for the FBI or something like that. I could see some of that. But personality tests, let's be honest, most personality tests vary depending on the mood you're in that day and everything else. You could take it again the next day, be in a great mood or be in a bad mood, and you're going to get entirely different results. So how effective is that really at hiring a team member that is going to fit the team?
I think really having the conversation and just talking with them. I mean, obviously, when you start an interview, you want to do a little bit of small talk to put them at ease. Then they're more likely to share things when you've put them at ease. But you have to be careful too what you ask in those kind of informal part of the interview conversation, because there are things that can get you in trouble. That can borderline on discrimination, and you wouldn't necessarily think, what's so, discriminatory about that. But even, where do you live, could identify a specific ethnic neighborhood in a particular, there could be a perception of discrimination in that, anything about national origin, sexual orientation, family status. We had a case, where somebody was obviously pregnant in the interview, and that, you cannot discriminate just based on that. And I had my own experience of that as a young newlywed, interviewing for a position in a dental office, because I was a dental hygienist back in the day. So I have made quite a career transition. But, they were asking me like, well, when do you plan to start your family? And that is like, I knew enough even back then, and that was the 1980s, that was not a relevant question. And I, kind of handled it as best I could, but I didn't get the job. And it made me wonder,
Well, and we know that is a thing in the job environment against women bias of maybe if they get pregnant, they won't be able to work. And that's a real thing. So that's the real thing today.
And here in the US.
Yeah.
And ageism is another concern at the other end of the spectrum. And we do have laws in the US that prevent discrimination over the age of 40. But, you've got to be careful with how you're interviewing and how you're evaluating candidates to not let that, come into play.
Yeah, and let's be honest, with ageism, the only way you could rule that out is have a blind interview. You couldn't see the person, and all you could hear was a voice at that point.
I went myself. I mean,
so
gray hair, I'm of a certain age, but
same. I mean, So what I want to make clear to everyone too, and I know you work with this isn't just about having to hire a full-time employee, that your interviewing techniques also work for like hiring a subcontractor or a service provider. Say like I'm going to go hire a VA now, or a web designer or something for my website. Your interview questions work for all those situations, right?
Oh my goodness, yes. Yeah, it doesn't really matter whether they're a contractor, subcontractor, full-time regular employee, part-time regular employee. It doesn't matter. Any role that you want to fill, you can use this technique in order to get the best candidate for the position.
So what do you think what's the best way to get the right stories out of them?
I think start by getting them comfortable, kind of building rapport at the beginning of the interview, as I mentioned earlier. And also even setting things up, like at the beginning of the interview, you'll tell them, I'm looking for specific examples of things that you've actually done. So I want to know, the situation or task that you were presented with. What was the action you took? What were the results or the outcome that you achieved? We call it the STAR, and the ST is the situation or task. The A is the action, and the R is the results. And if you're not getting a full answer, you just keep asking follow-up questions until you get the information that you need and you complete your STAR. So that's the key. And and sometimes, you don't want to lead them into an answer, but sometimes you can ask a little question, ask a little follow-up question, or give them a little prompt to kind of help them think through how they're going to answer their question. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's pretty cool. So so the goal is to get them to give a realistic view of what they've done and kind of suss out what they've actually done versus what they haven't done, that kind of stuff, so that you're hiring.
Right. And, and the thing too, in terms of impartiality and fairness, is you want to ask each candidate for the role the same set of questions. So don't do this off the cuff. Have some questions in mind ahead of time. And even to back up before that, to develop those questions, you need to have a good idea. Either a written job description is best of what you need the person to do, what are the qualifications that and the experience that you would like them to have, and then develop questions that get at the kind of information that will let you know whether they've had that experience, whether they have those characteristics, whether it's something like leadership or how they work in a team, or communication skills, or something that you can just observe, in the course of the interview. You might want to ask them questions about, customer service or problem solving, or, their technical, if you're looking for a VA, their experience with whatever you need them to do. So you definitely want to tailor your questions, to the specific role and to the job description.
That's really cool. Well, let me ask you too. Okay, so say we go over into, I have a ton of service providers in my audience and coaches. So a lot of times, yes, they're hiring teams, but they're also even hiring other service providers and stuff who have testimonials. Now, I get you're wanting the person to tell the actual stories as well, but how do you feel about testimonials as well, and checking those to help evaluate a candidate for being right?
Yeah, that can get a little dicey, because somebody could just make up something fake, and present,
Oh, yes.
in the conversation, they could share an example, if they have something in writing with company letterhead, with the individual, or if they've, worked with clients, maybe they can screenshot something that they've received. Even sometimes, they may, if they have a website, they may have their testimonials on the website. And, in some ways, there is just an element of trust with that, because, people, I suppose, could fake that. But,
You brought up a thing though that made me think, and I don't like to get into politics, but this is a really big example recently of a U.S. politician who lied on his application about his education. I mean, with no names, no nothing, but we're going to talk about this for the fact that obviously he got into quite a prominent position on those lies. So no matter what you do, there's some.
It was from my neighboring state. The state next door to where I live is where that politician was from. Word to candidates when you're applying for a position, companies do tend to do background checks these days. And if you lie, you will be found out more than likely. And I mean, we've had a few situations with my former employer where we did have to withdraw job offers because of things that we found out in the background check, where people didn't have the degree that they claimed to have had, or didn't work at the place where they said that they had. So maybe we should do that for the Senate. Or the Congress.
I agree that background checks should be ran. You know what? The first thing I saw when I saw that, I'm going to be honest, it's like, they would have run a background check on me. Why did our actual, I don't even want to get into politics with this, but this has to do with hiring. This has to actually do with hiring. This was somebody who was put in a job position where a background check was not ran.
Yep, I guess that's not something I typically do with Congress here in the U.S. Hopefully, I mean, and with a small employer, you might not do that. But, I don't have any specific advice in terms of, names of companies you should look into. But that would be a service, that is
maybe
paying for and considering, because there are services out there that can, provide those services. I mean, we were a large employer where I last worked. So, we had a couple of different vendors over the course of the, 20 years that I was there. But, there are service providers that can do that. And, and the other thing is criminal history. And there's laws about that too. Here in the U.S. And so you do need to be careful, and you have to really handle it on a case-by-case basis. Like, how relevant is it to the position? If you have somebody that was, you find out was a sex offender, and they're working on an off shift with a primarily female workforce, for example, that might be a real reason to
Not
take
hire.
a job offer, once you've made it. But other things like a DUI for somebody that's not going to be driving, might
Is
be
it
and
relevant?
again, not legal advice, just general educational comments. But
that makes sense, though. And I mean, yeah, all of that makes sense. So, what would be your advice? I say, because a lot of small businesses maybe don't have the extra cash to do a background check. What would be your advice to make sure that they're doing the best they can to get the right people in interview and pretty much come out on top without a bad experience?
I think generally speaking, again, is just probe. Don't rush through the interview. Um, get the person talking. You can always ask for references. And that can have limited value because nobody's going to give you a name likely of somebody who would give them a bad reference. So you have to kind of take that with a grain of salt. But I mean, certainly if you're hiring a VA, if they have other clients, that they've worked with, you could ask for them to provide, some names of a client that they have worked with and done work for, and that has some value at least. But it can't, it's not foolproof. It's not foolproof. But
And nothing ever is for sure, but you do the best you can. And
yep.
then,
Yep.
so, it's funny. I saw this the other day, and this, of course, was on, I think this is probably based around advice on Amazon referrals, but I happen to know I come from the house sitting world as well. And when reviews are too perfect, like you got 5 stars across the board, people start also distrusting you too. So is it better to maybe admit some mistakes or something you're not as strong as or whatever when you're in the interview or you're owning up for a job? Don't try to be too perfect. Realize you do have.
Yeah, and as an interviewer, you may want to ask them, a question that says, "Hey, we've all made mistakes. Tell me about a time when you made a mistake and what did you learn from it?" Something like that, or tell me about a time when you worked on a project and you struggled to meet the deadline or didn't meet the deadline. So you can actually ask for them. I would say start with some more positive situation questions first, but as you get into it and talk about it, and even preface the question by saying we've all had times when we've made a mistake or we missed a deadline, or so to kind of put them at ease, to not saying that I expect perfection because we are all human. None of us is perfect. We've all had situations where things haven't quite gone as well as we had hoped, and then just listen for how they handled it, what lessons they may have learned from it, or another scenario where they took what they learned and applied it and did better the next time, something like that.
Well, and that makes sense to me because you were talking about soft skills earlier. And honestly, for me, when it came to hiring for the landscaping world, and even for social, working with clients with my social media management, knowing their coping skills for being able to handle a problem or a mistake or something going on with the client, to me, that's very important to know that they have those skills.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Because are they going to fall apart or are they going to actually be able to get through it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Very, very important for sure. Mm-hmm.
So, cool. That's really cool. I love this kind of stuff. And anyone's out there, drop in the comments any questions you've gotten for Miss Carolyn. And if not, of course, you guys, if you're catching the replay, you can drop them later. But what question, or just give us experiences you've had with hiring team members or being hired onto a team and how that went for you. Let us know. And drop your questions in there because we do have a little lag, so it takes a minute for them to come through. And we're going to keep talking about this some more. What's something that everybody needs to know. Well, let me back that up. In your experience, and I know it can vary, but when it comes to small business owners, a lot of time, what is the first team member that people add?
Obviously, it depends on the nature of the business, but I think probably a virtual assistant for particularly those of us that are in the online business arena. Uh, Having a virtual assistant, somebody to assist you with your, whether it's, social media, whether it's your email, any of those kind of things, that probably is going to be the first employee or contractor. I mean, if you're in, manufacturing or whatever, you might hire somebody to, I mean, if you're making, craft items or whatever, hire somebody to help you sew or, do whatever the craft thing is. It really does depend on the nature of your business. But even that, I mean, many of us, get into business because we have a passion for something. And when you start out, you're wearing all the hats, you're doing everything, you're doing the social media, you're doing the advertising, you're doing the production. If you're making something, you're putting out the content. And, at some point you feel drugged down by the fact that you're trying to do it all. And so, think about where your pain points are and what really lights you up. So, if there's things that you can do, but you don't really like to do, or things that you're really not that good at, that would be a good place to start. Kind of.
That's what we say.
And so that you can focus more on the things that you love, the things that are your passion, the things that are the reason you got into business in the first place, and let some of those other things go. I've heard about a grid, where you're talking about things that your competency level versus what you love, and you'll want to kind of start giving away those, probably start with the things that you're not good at and you don't love to do. But then from there, you go to the stuff that, maybe I can do it, but I don't love doing it. I'm competent, but I don't love it. Give that away. And really the more you can focus on where your expertise is, where your passions are, the better. And then start delegating all the other things.
I'm reading Benjamin Hardy's book right now, Who Not How, and that's exactly what it is about. Instead of continuing to try to wear all the hats, start asking the question, how do I do this? Start asking, who can do this for me? As the first question you ask when you start unloading the things off, or if something new comes at you and it's something that does need to happen in your business, but it's not your expertise, start asking who instead of how. And I'm like, it was such an empowering book. If anybody hasn't read it, I highly recommend it.
Sounds good. And I'm in that. I mean, I'm a solopreneur at this point. And struggling, over the last couple of days, struggling with some tech stuff. And I've considered myself fairly tech savvy, but it was a new program that I had not worked with before. And it was definitely, a learning curve. And it was like, oh my goodness, I would pay somebody to do this going forward. And, something that somebody that I've listened to online talks about too, about thinking about how hiring that person could actually be revenue generating for you, because it keeps you from having to do that stuff. And, if you increase your productivity and your focus, I think the initial concern, when you're just starting out and you're not making a lot of money in your business, is how am I going to pay to hire somebody? But if you really think it through and figure out how, freeing up your time to focus on the things that only you can do, can actually generate income for your business, and their salary will be paid out of that increased revenue in your business.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm always telling my clients to focus on money-making activities versus busy work. And it's not saying the busy work doesn't need to be done, because in a lot of cases, it's admin work or those little tasks that do need to happen, or accounting. Oh my God. The first person I hired out to was an accountant. I forget it. That was the first person I hired to and got off my plate for sure. But yeah, so I'm a good example of this. 1-to-1, 1 hour 1-to-1 with me. I charge $500 and get that for it. So if I'm doing, say, accounting, just throw that in there. If I'm trying to do my accounting and figure that out, instead of being able to book that call, then that's costing me quite a lot of money. Whereas an accountant, I'm paying her at this point $200 a month. So it would take me hours to do what she's doing for $200 a month for upkeeping my books. So you've got to cost weigh that stuff when it comes to doing it. And then you've got amazing sites like, and I know a lot of people immediately cringe when I say like Fiverr or Upwork or something like that, but these are great places to start getting candidates.
Right. And I've heard, again, because I haven't hired anybody myself yet, for my business, but, you can get people from the, Philippines or other parts of the world where the pay rates are a lot lower than, here in the US or even in Europe where you are, Heidi. And so it can be very cost effective, and you can get very competent people that are very happy to work for, less than us first world pay scales. And you're providing a living for them. And so that's a great place to start with looking
it is. And I want to bring in real quick, because I know a lot of people immediately go, no, you're exploiting these people when you do that. And I want to bring in a fact, no, you're not. You're not. Right. We're not talking about making them work for $2 an hour or anything like that. We're talking about paying the rates they are charging that are fair for where they are, and they pick their rates. You're not telling them what to charge. They're business owners. So I truly believe in that. And I've looked at both sides of it and everything. And yes, the cost of living are lower. It's different. So what they charge is different, but you're still empowering a business owner that wouldn't have that job if you didn't give it to them. So think about that. You're still spreading it, but if you are dictating their wages, now we're talking about exploitation. That's something different.
Yeah. I mean, I've been on Upwork myself looking, to do some contract recruiting work. And I, saw different individuals with similar background to mine and what they were asking for in terms of the rate. And, it's certainly less than what I would ask for with my level of expertise as someone who lives in the US. But, in their part of the world, it, is a lower cost of living. And so, they're able to offer their services for that lower rate.
I know it's truly always amazing to me, because some of the ladies I've seen from the Philippines are charging like $10 an hour, and they've got degrees, and some of them have 1 to 2 degrees or more, or masters. And I'm just like, wow, anywhere else you would be charging way up there. But it truly is. I do, because I know there's a lot of argument on this topic, but people, it is not about exploiting people. It's about paying what they're asking for on their rates, their business, not arguing with them. That where you come into the problem with that is where you will see people who, because I know Africa is another one of those countries, and I know several amazing copywriters from Africa who are charging the same rates as people living in the US or Europe, and they deserve it, and they get to charge and pick their rates, and they experience the bias because they're in Africa with people telling them, well, you live in Africa, I'm not going to pay those rates there. That ain't right. Those people got just as much. They've proven their chops. They know what they're doing. They're incredible copywriters, and this is just people in my circle, and that's exploitation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You do need to pay what they're worth. And
well, what they're asking rates. I mean, we're not dictating some other business's rates.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, tough topic on that one. I just know that's a big one.
And I mean, it's certainly worth having the conversation, and having been on Upwork myself, just to kind of see and look for opportunities. I can see the varying rates, and it's like, okay, well, I'm in the US, and this is what I would charge you for this service with, backed by, 20 odd years of
Right.
experience. If somebody else lives in another part of the world where the cost of living is lower, and I mean, they're going to undercut me, but it is what it is, from kind of that side of the equation. But
yeah. Well, I know I'll do a shout out for Chris Ward here because she's built a business empowering women business owners around the world in countries like that to where helping, there's all service providers, and she connects them with people like us to help us grow our business and stuff. And I'll tag her later to get in on the conversation because I know this is what she's passionate about as well. But let's get back. So it doesn't matter where they are in the world. At the end of the day, we just want to be able to hire the right person. So do you have any strategies for making sure you're doing that, say through, I mean, I know it's still the same effect, but I know people treat it differently, like through a Zoom call versus being in person. Is it different? Is there something you recommend?
I mean, I've done it both ways. When I was employed full time, of course, we went through the pandemic and they sent us all to work from home. And so, we did video interviews. Now it was a manufacturing facility. So, on a limited basis, we might bring people in just so that they could, if you're hiring a mechanic to fix, the highly sophisticated manufacturing machines that we had, for example, it would be helpful for them to kind of see what they would do. And so, on a limited basis with all the COVID protocol and everything, we did bring people in. But if it's a more, office professional type position, then that was less necessary for them to actually see. Obviously, if you're going to offer a position, people would like to see where they work, but during that time at least, and when we're talking about an online business where somebody's going to be 100% remote, and I would definitely recommend though using some sort of video interviewing rather than telephone. So, whether it's Zoom, Microsoft Teams, whatever capability you have, it's just good to be able to put a name and a face and see the visual, a little bit of, I mean, in this little square, you can only see so much body language, but you get so much more, I think, from being able to see the person versus just hearing their voice. There's a limit, I mean, we've all had those conversations maybe that have gone south on us, via text or via phone call because we couldn't see the body language, the facial expression, that some very small percentage is the words and that somebody says, and then you've got the inflection and the tone of voice and then the body language. And so, at least visually being able to see the person is so much better than just doing a telephone interview. So yeah, I would highly recommend doing a video interview at the very least. And if you're hiring somebody to actually work, in your office or at your small manufacturing plant or, wherever that might be, if it's going to be an on-site job, then I would recommend interviewing the person in person. Maybe have a preliminary conversation via video chat and then do a follow-up, on site would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I know it's important because, I mean, like you were saying, we're all small business owners here and we're getting team members, and you do want to be able to hire around the world. So you have that advantage of, getting the best person for the job at the point in time. I know for me, video has definitely worked.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, well, Miss Carolyn, I happen to know you have a wonderful new lead magnet. People can download a little freebie gift for everybody that has some amazing questions on it to help them interview easier. Why don't you tell them a little bit more about that?
Sure. I have a guide that will provide you with 7 tips for the actual interview process and crafting your interview questions, and then 10 sample interview questions, that you can use as a model for creating your own question, in terms of the format. And I've picked, 10 different characteristics or skills that you would want to employ, ask someone about or try to discern. I'm sure you could think of others, but at least it gives you a model for creating your own interview questions, and how to ask, even a couple of follow-up questions along with it. So I'm offering that to anybody that wants to get started with hiring, or maybe has had a not so great experience with hiring in the past and wants to improve their hiring and interviewing techniques.
Nice. Yes, I've already downloaded it, everyone. I check everybody's gifts out ahead just so I can give you an insider view. It was very easy, just your name, your email, and then you get that delivered. And it is a very useful guide. I mean, those questions you can definitely use as a template for hiring your first or your next team member, and make sure you get the right person. It's well done. I've already seen it. And we are going to wrap up. Miss Carolyn, I'm going to tell them a little bit about the networking event coming next week. And while I'm doing that, you think about one thing you're going to leave us with today. So everyone, we are having our first monthly networking event next Wednesday, May 29th. It's at 11 Eastern, 4 p.m. UK. And we would love to invite all of you to be there. It's for service providers and coaches. And we're just going to hang out and network. It's free to join. And this is not a sales pitch event. It is for you to come and maybe meet collaborations. Maybe you do meet your next client, but it is to come just to get to know everybody and go away with some new friends. So do come join us. The link for both that and Miss Carolyn's gift for you are in the comments on LinkedIn now. I'm putting them up before the show now since Restream doesn't allow us to do them. And Miss Carolyn, what's one final thought you want to leave us with today?
Sure. Well, we've talked about hiring based on the job description and the characteristics you're looking for. But one other thing that you want to look for is motivation. Are they motivated to do the work? Are they motivated to work in a company like yours, whatever your company is? And so you want to probe a little bit on that. If you have an on-site job and they really want to work remotely, that's not going to be a fit. Or if you have a very collaborative work environment and they're kind of the lone wolf type that really wants to work alone, that's not going to be a good fit. So keep that in mind and probe that a little bit with your questioning as well.
That is an amazing insight to leave, and I fully agree. I mean, I never made a great employee because nobody ever wanted to work with me. It's not because I'm not a team builder or anything. I am, but I also like to have a little bit of independence, and most corporations, you don't have any.
So, and that's exactly.
I'm one of those people that questions, why are we doing this way when I know this way's easier? But it's neither here nor there. That's why I'm a business owner. But
yeah, that's good to know about yourself as well.
I love working in teams. I just don't like working, to be perfectly honest, with asinine formats. Then there's a better way to do it.
I get it. I get it.
You've been in corporate long enough, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, for sure. And I've discovered, at least at this phase of my life, that corporate is not for me anymore. Hence starting my own business.
Yes. So if anybody needs help with hiring your next team members or getting a full strategy in place for that, connect with Miss Carolyn, because she really does. I mean, I don't know how many conversations we've had around this, but every time I do, I am like, okay, this woman really knows how to do this. So connect with her. Make sure you download the gifts she's given you. Join the networking event next week. And Miss Carolyn, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to our amazing audience. We appreciate all of you and so grateful. And I'll be looking forward to seeing you next week, which I don't have a guest to announce because my guest had to bow out. So anybody hit me up in DM. I'm looking for one right now. And we will see you next week. Thanks, Miss Carolyn.
Oh, you're quite welcome. It's been my pleasure to chat with you today.